Peace, everybody. The subject of today's video is know who your enemies are. One of the biggest, easiest ways to succeed in this world is to identify and properly place all those who mean you harm, who don't mean you well. The book, The Art of War by Sun Tzu, ancient Chinese general, probably wasn't called China at the time, but he said, know thy enemy, know yourself. And they talk about, some people interpret that as somehow psychologically analyzing your enemy, psychoanalyzing your enemy. But I look at it simple. Know who your enemies are. Identify your enemy. Because if you don't know who your enemy is, that person is a spy, is working a deception. And as long as you don't identify who they are, they're actually seen as a friend or neutral. But in all actuality, they're working against your best interests. So there's a simple method of identifying who are your enemies and certain actions, appropriate actions to take after you identify who your enemies are. 1, who was there for you in your time of need? Now, when you look at the so-called black people as a whole, we had the civil rights movement, we had slavery, Jim Crow, and whatnot. Who was there helping us in those times, in our most darkest hours? During Jim Crow, pretty much nobody. Nobody was there helping us during Jim Crow. During slavery, we had abolitionists, we had the Underground Railroad, we had the Civil War, we had the Republican Party. The Republican Party was set up to abolish slavery. And we had the Civil War. And during the Civil War, we had the Northern Army and we had the Confederacy. The Northern Army consisted of black people from America, French and German immigrants. The Irish, Caucasians, the Anglo-Saxons, they all went to the Confederacy, or they fled to Canada. So they had no interest in helping us during slavery. We had the War 1812, where the United States government waged war against the black people in the Midwest, Chicago region, Michigan, Wisconsin, Montana, whatever. The British was our allies. And they freed a lot of so-called black people and took them back to England to be free. So we can look at who was there in our darkest hours. We can identify certain groups of people who was there helping so-called black people. Also, during so-called slavery, it was so-called Great Britain who was the main country pressuring America to end slavery under so-called Queen Victoria, right? But who weren't there helping us? Who wasn't there helping us? The Africans. The Africans has never helped the black Americans ever. The Arabs. They come to our community to exploit the economy. The Asians come and exploit our economy. They never helped the Caucasians, the Irish, the Democrats. The so-called Democrats has never helped the so-called black people. So these are your enemies. Now, once you identify your enemy, you got to look at, okay, what should I do? What is my appropriate action to these enemies? For one, you give them absolutely no support whatsoever. You don't give them any votes. You don't support any of their businesses. You don't even think their thoughts. You don't celebrate any of their icons. Nothing. You just don't give them anything. Nothing. Also, the Jews, the enemy of the black people too. Rahm Emanuel came and destroyed 22,000 buildings in the black community. Now, this is on a massive national scale. But the so-called black people also have an enemy within. And an enemy within are certain groups. We have the Black Greeks, the Alpha Kappa Alphas, the black women fraternity who got Kamala Harris in there. The Black Greeks, the men and women, the talented tent Negroes who believe that only 10% of so-called Negroes should exist. The 90% should not exist. They should be exterminated. And they should be the 10% after they exterminate the rest of the 90%. They should be the slaves or the servants of the Caucasians. The Black Greeks is the enemy. The black secret societies are the enemy. We consider them Masons, Shriners, these street gangs from all over America. They're working against the interest of the so-called people. And then when you look at another aspect, the so-called black woman is the enemy, because the so-called black woman is solely financing the Asian community with their self-hatred, getting their nails done, their weave done, the beauty supplies, eating their dog and cat food. You know, they support all of these foreigners in our community. They're hiring all of these illegal immigrants to do work on their houses. The black so-called Negro woman has exterminated, aborted millions of black children for whatever reason. However you want to justify it, the average black woman is a mass murderer. So what do you do when you identify these select close enemies? For one, you don't do any business with a Black Greek. You don't do any business with a black secret society organization, criminal enterprise organization. And you don't deal with a black woman at all in any aspect of life. No dealings whatsoever. You just don't deal with them. Don't give them any business. Don't get in no relationship with them. Just separate from your enemy. Like, the easiest form of action is to separate and get distance from your enemies. And once you get distance from your enemies, you'll be able to regroup and gain power and be able to wage an attack or a defensive. Right now, we're so surrounded by enemies and we can't do anything. From every angle, we're getting punched in the mouth, murdered down. We don't know who's, because everybody's the enemy, basically. And nobody's really an ally that we can identify as the ally. But once we totally separate from all of these obvious enemies, then we'll be able to identify the allies of our people and our individual selves. And once you do that, then you'll be able to begin existing as a people. Right now, we're just a sacrificial lamb that everybody's contributing, benefiting from, you know. And we got to stop looking at things by color, because Africans are not our allies. We have certain African nations, such as South Africa, who is an ally. South Africa. But as far as other African nations, they haven't really done much of anything to assist us in our time of darkness. They have done anything, nothing. So they can't be seen as an ally. But they come to America to exploit our people. They all come here to exploit, and the Caucasians bring these foreigners here to exploit my people. The Caucasian is the enemy. Totally. There's nothing, the Caucasian, I would say the Caucasian American. Because in Europe, I would say in Eastern Europe, the like Yugoslavia or Serbia, whatever, certain aspects in Russia, like Europe is not like how we looking in America. All of them don't see each other as the same. We might have certain people in Europe that don't have a white supremacist mentality, but we can't identify who they are because we have this white supremacy in America, and who was dominated by Irish Anglo-Saxons. You see what I'm saying? Joe Biden, the most racist devil you could ever imagine, that the so-called Negro woman forced this devil in there. shown that the black woman is the enemy. Now, the so-called Negro male, the average black man is on child support, is in economic dire and distress due to the black woman. It is not feasible economically to even have a family with a black woman, because they're in such a mentality in which they want to brag about being single mothers and putting you on child support. They don't realize once you get on child support and you don't make them payments, you're ruined economically. Your credit, everything is messed up. You can't do anything. But this is what the Negro female is putting the so-called black man through. On average, it's not 100%, but it's not something that you should be even attempting to do. You see what I'm saying? Because it's not conducive to success. The black woman is undesirable, undateable, unmarriageable. They're the total enemy of the people. Them, the Caucasians, the Asians, the Hispanics, really everybody is the enemy. But the only power that you really have is the power to separate and to withhold your dollar and support from these enemies. You're not obligated to give anything to the enemy. Nothing. Especially your obvious enemy. But that's about it.